All right. I am so excited because today I am welcoming my friend and my colleague, Jen Pike, to the show. Jen, welcome to Better.
Thanks so much for having me, Steph. I'm pumped to be here.
We just had about a 30-minute conversation before we pressed record. So I figured we should stop chit-chatting and getting caught up on everything because you just had a big recent move out to BC, which maybe we can talk a touch about. But I wanted to start because all the juicy stuff was in that conversation. I wanted to bring it into our conversation. So before we get into your move, I thought for my listeners who don't know you and don't know your work, you and I we are very similar in that we talk a lot about honoring female physiology. We talk about honoring the cyclicity of our ebbs and flows of our moods and our hormones and our energy levels and all the things. And I would love for you to explain to me and the Bettys what your origin story is. How did you fall into this line of work? What have been some of your aha moments in terms of your own health? And what are you doing? What are you doing now?
Well, for me, it started really young. I can remember being 6 and my dad taking me to the Toronto Fitness Institute with him when he would go and do his workouts. And I remember they had like this junior kids club environment. And right out of the gates, I was so just intrigued and enamored by watching people move their bodies in this way. And I remember that by the time we had moved, north of Toronto at the age of 9, I was going regularly with my dad to do my own kind of movement. And he was doing his thing. And my mom was going to like jazzercise with the ladies. And it was always part of my environment at home. And then by the age of 14, I was going to the gym every morning with my dad before high school. And I knew very, very early what I wanted to do for a career. And when I started, I was going to school for anatomy and kin and like human kinetics. And I started to do personal training right out of the gates. And I was working with a lot of athletes then. So I started off in more of an androgynous kind of male environment. I was working with primarily hockey players at the time. I spent a period of time working with the Toronto Maple Leafs with their strength and conditioning team when Gary Roberts was captain. And we were doing a lot of labs out of York University and Station 7. And I loved it because working with athletes, you could just do anything with them and they would do it because that was the name of the game and they were committed to their craft. But they also had this team in this village around them. They had the nutritionists, they had the chiropractors, they had the massage therapists, they had it all at the tip of their fingers. And so, yes, they worked hard, but they also had it all around them. I was part-time working at home as a personal trainer in Newmarket where I grew up, and that was all with women. A lot of them moms. I did not have kids yet at that time. And we were getting results with them doing movement, but then the nutrition piece was becoming bigger. And I decided to go back to school at that time. It was in 2001. Actually, my first day of school for holistic nutrition was 9/11. So I'll never forget that day. And I started to implement more nutritional methodology in with their training. And we were still getting, good results, even better results. But there was always something that was missing. And I couldn't quite put my finger on the pulse, but it came up around their hormones, came up around their sleep. And then I became a mom myself. And I was like, oh, okay, this is very different. And I remember vividly after I had my first, I just wanted to call up every client I had had who had children before and just say, I am so sorry. I heard what you said, but I did not understand what you meant when you were describing to me what was going on. And that was a sliding door moment for me becoming a mother. I had this whole new appreciation for the female body in a way that I had just never been able to tap into. Like it wasn't tangible to me before. It was just information. And so when I became a mom, that was it. Like I was just all in. And what was interesting for me, Steph, is at the age of 17, I was in a yoga studio one day and this book literally fell off the shelf when I was putting my shoes on called Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. And as a 17-year-old, I was on the pill. I didn't know that meant that I wasn't having, a true period. And I opened up this book and it was talking about tracking. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating. And I literally started to track on graph paper with a pencil my cycle, not knowing that being on the pill meant I didn't need to be tracking that. But this was just kind of how it started. And so I fast forward all these years later when I became a mother, and I started to do this deep dive really now into learning more about the endocrine system and the hormones and the interaction with that on our gut and our microbiome and our nervous system and adrenals and thyroid. And I was having these just, green light moments nonstop. And I was hungry for the information because it was helping me in my own body, but it was helping all the women that I was working with in a way that I'd never been able to quite touch before. And so that really started for me the journey of beginning to have a specialty. I would say before that I was really a generalist as a nutritionist. I would just work with anybody who needed help. In the fitness side of things, I went from working with athletes to only working with women. That was the demographic that I was super passionate about.
Which is a big jump because you probably went primarily from men, working with male athletes with the whole community and village around them, to working probably with a mom of one or two, single mom in some cases as well, which is a huge jump in terms of demographic.
100%. And she had no community.
Right.
And so it was amazing. And then, when my kids were 2 and 4, I thought it was a really good idea to open up my own brick and mortar space because I thought that would create simplicity. I even called it simplicity. And it did on some level. I wasn't chasing after the paycheck anymore. It was really hard. It was a very hard few years for me as a young mom and running a company and having team, but it was the birthplace of the woman that I really needed to step into. And it started this beautiful community. And it's really where a lot of my research and development happened that propelled me into what I do now with the Hormone Project and Synced, because every day I was showing up and it was evolving in front of me, watching these women's bodies, listening to their stories, asking them questions, spending time together in community, spending time together in circle. It was just like, it was simultaneously one of the hardest times for me, but the most enriching periods of time as a woman in my life. I sold that 2015 and shifted my entire company online. And here we are today in 2021.
I think I resonate with a lot of your story because there's a lot of parallels. So I too ran a clinic when my children were very young. I would often leave because I wanted to be there in the afternoons for my bunnies. I would leave early in the morning. So I didn't get that. They didn't wake up with mom. Like they woke up with like either their dad or a caregiver, my mother who would come in early and help out. And very difficult, like dealing with the mom guilt all the time of like leaving the babies early in the morning, not having those morning cuddles with them and being there to start their day. But very similar to you, also seeing just absolutely stark different. I was still seeing men and women in my brick and mortar practice, but very different outcomes. For me, I was seeing very different outcomes in nutrition because we were running nutrition programs in addition to, some of the rehab and the body work that we were doing in the chiropractic clinic. But very much noticing patterns very early on that men and women had very different prognoses in terms of the adherence to the program because, you said something that was really important. She didn't have community. So, and she needs, one of the things that I think is really important to highlight here is that women need community potentially more than men do because men tend to be a little bit more independent. I used to be able to tell a patient, if it was a male patient, okay, your upper body strength is this, it needs to be here. So next month when we retest you, I need to see such and such of an improvement. And they would just go and get after it. Like they would just go and do their thing. They'd come back a month later, kill the test, and they'd be like, okay, what's next? Whereas with a female, I had to check in with her more. There was more pieces of encouragement. She was frustrated more. It seemed like she had a lot more demands in terms of the hats that she was wearing every single day and the support system that you alluded to, and not really understanding how she was physiologically different than, her husband who might've been doing the same program. So I appreciate what you're saying because I think that one of the things I want women to understand, and we've talked about this when I was on your podcast, is that women are not little men. We're different. And I was wondering, I'd love to hear in your words, in your experience, in your clinical experience as well, how women are not little men, how we are different every single day of the month, whether it's energy wise, hormonally, mindset, sleep wise? Like, what are some of the things that you have, that you've been able to tease out that make us distinct as females versus our male counterparts?
Well, yes, to all of the above that you just mentioned. I think one of the first things is understanding that, and this isn't, I'm not going to blanket term this for every man. But for a lot of men, it's like, okay, if you give them a task, they're not then thinking about how it's going to impact the kids, the wife, the coworkers, the whoever else. Is where for us, when we're given a task or something to do, especially if it is something that is for us, the individual as a woman, we automatically think about the impact it's going to create and have on everything else that is part of our life. I always say as women, it's like, we may look like we're standing there with the same two arms as a man, but truthfully, we're like an octopus. We just have like all these moving limbs and parts, and we're catching all different things or repelling different things in any given moment. You just don't see it literally on the outside, but it's what we're feeling on the inside. And we are these beautiful cyclical beings as women, but because we've not been educated in that way, we don't understand that we go through different phases, not only every single month, but every season, truthfully, in any given moment. And we're made up of so much more than just what we do. We're made up of what we're coming in contact with, the other people's energy around us. So when you talk about these demands, these aren't just demands you see in your Google Calendar. These are, they're not just the tangible demands. They're the demands that perhaps are stories and limiting beliefs we're putting on ourselves. It's areas we feel like we have shortcomings. You talked about the mommy guilt. It's the things we feel like we could or should be doing, but we don't have the capacity to do. It's what we want to say and speak, but we don't, that we're holding on to. We are like, I look at women and I can't not see this like beautiful quilt of all these different pieces that have just been building up to create the fabric of who we are over the years. But for some women, if they're not connected to that beautiful quilt can feel like an armor that is like weighing them down. And so when we're talking about that, women don't necessarily understand the physiology of that or how deep it goes. It's like, how could we, growing up in the society that we have? We've never been empowered with the true potential or ability that our body holds on to, which is why when women come into your environment or listen to your podcast or my podcast or anything where there's like this immediate resonance and you hear it and you see it in women, right? Like they sit up taller, they stand taller, they lead forward with their chest. They're just like, oh my gosh, where has this information been my whole life? And that, that's what gets me up in the morning.
And I would say that's probably the single biggest piece of feedback that I would gander that you receive. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you that I receive, like, where was this information? Why wasn't I ever taught about my fertility? Why was I taught to fear my fertility? Why was I never taught about actually how it works? And I remember having a conversation with Lisa Hendrickson Jack. I know she's been on your show as well. And I remember we were talking about fertility, and I remember having this realization while we were talking. And I said, when I was younger, I used to, and I was, no, not throwing shade to any religion. I grew up Roman Catholic, so I can only speak to my experience, but I used to think getting in a pool, I could get pregnant by getting in a pool. Like I had no idea. I was like, oh my God, is there another guy in here? I'm just going to stay on the side. I had no idea how it worked. And I know that sounds foolish, but it's the absolute truth. I was so clueless about my fertility. And and I've had so many women tell me they spent years on the pill. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, well, I'm just ready to have a baby now, and got off the pill and expected them, to fall pregnant within a month or two. And certainly that was not, it's certainly the case for some people, for some women, but not all. And a lot of women are frustrated. Like, why didn't anyone talk to me about the side of it? Like, why was I told this was a low dose pill? Why didn't somebody say, hey, you may have some issues in fertility down the line? And why was I on this for 2 decades? Why didn't anyone ever think to take me off of this?
And so much of that, so in talking, about origin stories, I think for me as well too, and I'm so grateful for the gift that my life has been, but I'm adopted. And my birth parents were 15 and 16 years old when they got pregnant with me. And I've always known my birth story since day one. Like it was a bedtime story for me. And so my parents and my sister that I grew up with, my brother, my sister was 16 when I was 4. So I was watching from a very young age, her body go through all these things and that. So it was a conversation that was happening in our house. And I had questions from a very young ages, 15 and 16. I can remember when my sister turned 15 and the conversation changing in the house. And I was young, I was 3, around the stories my parents were telling me. And as I got older, it was, well, how did they get pregnant at 15 and 16? And so I just learned from a much younger age about different things. So I was lucky to have access to that. And it also, I think for me, I just became more empowered as a young woman because I knew that it wasn't just myth that you could get pregnant as a teen if you were having, intercourse. I was a product of that. I was living proof that actually could happen. And so I think for me, like I got so involved in learning about hormones and contraception and cycles and all of that from a young age because I didn't want that to be my destiny. And so it's part of what sent me down this path. And I think that a lot of my friends I grew up with, there was so much shame for them around periods. And I can remember being in gym class in high school.
Yeah.
And we'd get out of health class and I'd be like, just so you know what we just learned, totally not frigging true. Here's this, that, and the other. And they'd be like, oh my God, we're not even allowed to have our period products in the bathroom. Like we have to hide it and then take it in. And I just didn't grow up in that household. So for me, it was a bit different. And now too, like I have a daughter and a son, and my son, he could probably teach girls more about their periods than they actually know because we've never made it something that is, hush, hush.
I echo that. And I love that, your son can probably run. I feel like my son, like he's almost 11, could probably run a menstrual cycle class because and all the proper words as well, right? It's not like pee-pee and all. It's like there's vulva and there's a vagina and there's a uterus and there's an endometrial lining. And so that's been very important for me, for them to have the proper anatomical terms as well, so it's not this hush hush thing, that there's no shame around it. And we have conversations around testes and penises and, we have all these different conversations so that they know how to properly identify their parts as well, which I think is important.
And that shame piece for women, this is specifically like inside the Hormone Project where I work with women and our coaches do, is that we oftentimes are working with women late 30s, 40s, and in their 50s who've carried this shame and this guilt and this negative energy around their bodies and fertility for literally their entire life. And I can tell you that is also what will contribute to the severity of their symptoms, of their struggles, of what is going on. It's not just about, the quality of the bleed you see, or if you have breast tenderness or headaches or breakouts, or you're not sleeping at night. It's like constantly peeling it back and being like, well, where's your energy and your connection to this cycle that you have had? And it's amazing, again, when you spend time with women and you start to ask them more questions about it, they think it's because they're not eating enough vegetables or they're not, taking the right supplement. And I can tell you from, decades of clinical experience and working with women, that is almost always not the case. There is something deeper that's going on in there. When you start to talk to her and help her access those pieces, it's beautiful, the healing that can happen free from so many of the things that we think it's about.
Yeah. And I think that's such an important point, because it is often just like, what's the one supplement that I'm missing in my regime that's gonna move the needle for me? And it's more of this maybe overly simplistic, overly mechanistic. Like, if you start taking berberine, like, yeah, maybe it's gonna help you regulate your blood, glucose levels, but you still hate yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You still hate that you're a woman. You still hate your hips. You still hate, whatever you've decided to reject as, and women, sometimes this is the tough conversation. And I love that you've created communities like the Hormone Project. I'd love for you to speak more about that, and maybe Synced as well. I know those are two programs that you run. And I would lead into that with maybe having you walk us through what cyclical living means to you as a woman. What does it mean to live in harmony and live aligned with our cycles as women?
So within cyclical living, before that comes the cyclical awareness, you have to be aware first of what you're trying to pay attention to in order to start to apply that to the way that you are living your life. So this is not just tracking your bleed, because there's cyclical living for women that are in their fertility years who do still have a menstrual bleed. And there is cyclical living for women who either don't have a regular cycle, they're in perimenopause, or they've gone through menopause and beyond. So I'll start first by talking about the menstrual. So the first thing is you do want to start to track, whether it is an app that you're using on a device or you're literally just paper tracking it. I like for women to track more than just their actual bleed, right? Like that final phase. Your cycle is not when you have your period. Your period is that. It is your bleed week. This is really, it's the culmination. It is the end result of everything else that our body has gone through throughout the various phases. And the cycle is literally from that first day of bleed all the way through until you get that next first day of bleed. And I know you teach a ton about that on here. So it's paying attention to, yes, that, but also understanding the ebbs and flows of how you feel physically, physiologically, mentally, and emotionally throughout the month. When do you feel sharper cognitively and in your brain? When do you want to be more out there, and connecting and exposing yourself? When do you have the opposite of that, where you want to start to pull back and you want to start to, prune and kind of purge what's going on and start to detach yourself and let go of some things? When do you want to fully hibernate and do the inside work? When a woman can start to understand that there is literally chemistry changes happening in her body that can very much impact where and how she'll feel like that, it gives her a new level of understanding how she can show up in her life, that we are not men. We don't have a 24-hour rhythm. We are never going to be and function the same day to day ever, regardless of how old you are. And so when we talk about, like phase one, which is that follicular phase and the role that plays in our body, there's a seasonal connection and a moon connection to every single phase that we're going through that happens on the physiological side. There's an energetic component to that as well, too. So that follicular energy is very much like the spring. It's the emergence. It's like the planting new seeds. It's exciting. It's fresh. It's like, okay, you're coming out of your shell. This is that waxing moon energy. And this is when we are more primed to start new things, to take on something that's, a new passion project, to dig a little deeper, to put ourselves out there, to be very, very creative. When you start to move into something like ovulation, which is like that summer energy, which for me, ovulation, it's the full moon, it's bloom, it's all about growth. So you can still be in that very similar energy that you would in the follicular. This is a time where for a lot of women, they may, blow dry their hair, which could be a big thing for them. They put the earrings on. They want to be more seen. Their pheromones are changing to that as well, too. There's a different kind of attraction. And this isn't just about wearing a flowery dress and putting on your red lipstick. This is like you and your body as a woman. There's something that just like becomes woke in your system. And it's actually one of the things you can attune yourself to as a woman, because not every woman will feel that way coming into ovulation. And that can be one of the signs of something potentially being out of alignment, is if you feel the opposite of how I just described, like you want to crawl into a hole during ovulation, you're in a lot of pain, it feels very inflammatory, pay attention to that as well, too. When we come through that into our luteal phase, which is the longest of the phases, so is the waning gibbous phase of the moon, longest period of time. This is what we're in right now. This is the fall. This is the autumn. And it's my favorite phase of all four phases. It is the anchoring in. It is the having absolute resolution around what is serving you, what is not, what feels good. This is the calling. This is like really paying attention to, where do I want to show up and what do I want to, move away from? And this is like, for me, I always know when I'm entering it, even if it's like, I'm not looking at how I'm tracking it, because I will automatically be in my calendar. Where can I shrink things? What can I, make it less. So I can do that inside work. And this is preparing us for coming into our actual bleed or that new moon energy, which it's the inside work. Like we are literally shedding and regenerating organ. And I don't think women understand just how much work and energy goes into the phases our body moves through in a month. And that is just, we're talking about what's happening in our body. That is not then building your company, going to your job, raising your babies, being a partner, being, a sister, a daughter, a human being. That's not any of that gets tacked onto it. So when you start to connect and understand those phases in your body, you can start to now line up your life based on where energetically you're going to be in those phases. So it doesn't always lay out, there perfectly. Sometimes things in your schedule are going to happen when you're on your menstrual cycle. It doesn't mean that you have to cancel it because you're bleeding. It means that you double down on taking your care of yourself leading into those things. You're not overextending, you're supporting your blood sugar, you're, hydrated, you're taking care of your minerals, like those types of things. So this isn't, some women get confused on this and think, oh, geez, there's only 2 weeks out of the month where I can work. Or there's only 2 weeks out of the month that I can, lift weights, or I can, train to a certain intent. Right. That's not what this means.
Right.
So don't put dogma and lines around this. Like, let's make this how we are, which is, soft and curvy and juicy and very much in flow. You're just trying to understand the base of it so that you can create this level of flexibility in how you show up for your body versus the woman that is like, I'm type A, I'm task oriented. I'm do. And she's just like a generator that never runs out of fuel and is burning herself out. That is a slippery slope.
Yeah. And I think I love that you distinguish between women who are menstruating or in their reproductive years and women who are menopausal. Because again, if there's another area of confusion that I often run up against is like, well, how does this apply to a woman who's in perimenopause? Or how does this apply to a woman who's in menopause? And you and I are similar in that and you've been already mentioning some of the lunar cycles and how to anchor yourself. Like whether you are menstruating or not, you've had a hysterectomy, you're in menopause, you are, you have irregular cycles, anchoring yourself to the rhythms of the moon, I think are a wonderful practice. You've mentioned the new moon and the full moon. I often call the full moon like big ovary energy. It's like this expansion. It's like, I'm here. There's this sacred energy that's being given to you, hopefully because you've done some of the internal work that you just mentioned in that luteal phase. And you've been thinking about some of the things that are not aligned with you, whether it's, in your work life, in your personal life, the way that you are showing up. And then you are gifted, I think, every cycle with this expansive energy, this GSD, this like get stuff done energy. And if you are practicing some of these lunar, and I love the word lunatic because of course it means, someone who reveres the moon and actually that's what it means. It's not, even though in modern language it's used to, comment on someone's mental status. Yeah. But when we are in alignment with the pulses and the phases of the moon, I think that we can also just orient ourselves and ground ourselves into the earth through that connection with that beautiful celestial body as well.
Yeah. And, for us as women, we also, if you go back and look at the lineage of a lot of the words, the meanings of word and like lunar, lunacy, all of that, not only has it been connected to mental health status, but for women who were recognized as a threat hundreds and hundreds, thousands of years ago that were, revered as like medicine women. But back then that was not a positive thing. They were referred to as witches. They were referred to as, evil, and that they carried black magic with them. One of those things is us as women, we are, whether or not you understand this as we're talking about it now and you're hearing it, or you want to understand it, you are intimately connected with the lunar rhythm. You are intimately connected with Mama Nature. You are intimately connected with the seasons, even if you don't live in an area of the world where you literally see seasonal changes happen. Like you and I are both in North America, it's very distinct. This is something that is literally the fabric and like the akashic material of who we are as cellular human beings, as women. So it is fascinating. And I love working with women. I am perimenopausal myself right now. Menopause to me is like, it is the feminine uprising. It is this beautiful opportunity to fully embody who we are. And I work with so many women who are so sad that they've lost their period. And I understand and I empathize with that, but that doesn't mean that we no longer have a system that we can tap into. There is still a barometer within us. It's just a new learning.
Yeah. And, to your point around witches, I did a post on Instagram maybe a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month, however many weeks or whatever it was. And the title was Which Witch is Which, because I was talking about these medicine women who had, and it was tinctures we're coming up to this podcast is going to be produced in the next week or two. So just ahead of Halloween. And of course we have Halloween, we have the witches, and it's like with the boil on her nose, and she's this loner that has this big witch's brew. And it's like, or it could have been a healing soup. It could have been tinctures to help with the sniffles for her children. And recall that these witches, air quotes, witches, were burned in the public forum to set an example. So, the post that I made on Instagram was, why were we taught to be afraid of the witches and not the people who burned them alive?
Exactly.
These were the women that were healing their community, the medicine women, as you and I were talking about the show that you recommended for me to watch.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Outlander. You have to. It's not necessarily, there's some witch stuff that comes in there, but it's good for many other reasons. And your listeners, if they've watched Outlander, they will know why.
Okay. Yeah.
But I agree with you completely on that. And that is the question. There's all women of power on any level, a woman of confidence, a woman who's not afraid to use her voice, a woman who's not afraid to be an advocate for herself, has always been viewed as a threat.
Yep.
So, back then she was burned, she was stoned, she was drowned, she was whatever it was. Nowadays, that doesn't happen where we live, but you are censored, you are canceled, you are called a bitch, you are, talked about by everybody and anybody.
If you enjoy sex,
oh
there's
my gosh,
so many
God
words
forbid.
that we,
right?
Yeah.
All of it. Yeah. You come up with the thesaurus of all the different names of how women, and it's really sad. But I also look at it because I have a 15-year-old daughter, and we have conversations about like the mean girls, and I'm like, don't give them so much energy, because there are 10 times as many wonderful women and girls that are out there as there are the mean. They're just the loudest. So you can get loud in your own right, but you don't have to be boisterously loud. Get loud by doing the quiet work inside. It's like when you see entrepreneurs that are like, create the goals silently, smash them behind the scenes, and then like show what it is that you've done. I feel that same way about so much in life. We are in a culture now where, because of Instagram and Snap and TikTok and whatever the heck else, it's like we do it, we immediately have to announce it. It's coming, we immediately have to drip on it. There's no pause anymore of like actually relishing in the creativity of it or the celebration. I had this post I released, and I did an episode that I really struggle with celebrating success as a woman. I celebrate with, I haven't. I've just been rediscovering what luxury and celebration means to me, because I'm not connected to material things. And so in my head, I've had this idea that if I'm celebrating something, it needs to be with like a new bag or like a label or a trip. That I'm not doing right now. And so I really struggled with how to celebrate, and I had to redefine what luxury means for me. And luxury for me, it's like, my luxury is actually quiet mornings alone. It's like drinking something warm in a mug. It's wearing clothes that make me feel beautiful and feminine. It's being in nature. It's not rushing. It's, so I think that so much of that for us as women, this all tethers into when you start to become aware of your body as a whole, all these other beautiful pieces start to just appear that you didn't even maybe know were part of how you be healthy.
I love that. And I think, celebrating as a woman, coming back to your point around community, this is why, maybe your daughter is, dealing with mean girls. And, we sort of know historically that women are not actually allowed, as from a cultural perspective, to be aggressive. So the only avenue that women typically have is to have this sort of backdoor, to assault, someone's character and to talk behind their back and to have these, like the mean girls where they create rumors and all this, around other girls. But when you create community, as you said, for every 3 mean girls, there's going to be 8 or 10 amazing girls or women that want to come together and support. And it's like, don't believe the hype. There's not more mean girls than there are nice ones, right?
Yeah.
But it's when you come into a community like some of the ones that you have created in the Hormone Project and in Synced. And I want to talk about your upcoming project, The Audacious Woman, as well, where you can feel safe in circle and you can celebrate and know that there's not going to be,
it's not going to be held against you. You're not going to be, punished for the things that you desire. You say that it's not going to be, like, I think that's it, is that we're so afraid because we don't want to be the example that might be in a negative way, or that we're going to be made fun of, or that everybody's opinion is going to hit us like hand smacking us. And that is ultimately what women are afraid of, is I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want attention. And I don't want people to think bad of me. Exactly.
I don't want to be the one that gets lynched.
Yep. Yeah. And it's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And well, let me start off by saying that I will always celebrate your wins.
Well, thank you, and vice versa.
Let's talk a little bit about you mentioned it, but I would love to get a deeper sense with someone who's had the tenure that you've had in terms of understanding cyclical living for women of all walks of life at any arc in the female experience. What are some of the daily habits and patterns and rituals that you have found to really anchor you? And how do those change for you right now as a woman in perimenopause? How do those change either seasonally, monthly, weekly, or daily?
So the first one for me is movement. Movement for me is how I say hello to my body. It's also how I come home to myself. And I say movement, not exercise, because I don't believe those to be the same thing. So movement for me, it could be breath work. That is my movement in the morning. It could be getting outside in nature. It could be actually doing a true workout where I'm lifting or I'm doing bar Pilates, something like that. That I move my body based purely on my cycle. So that is something that cyclically shifts for me. I need to start my morning with quiet time for me. So typically it's going to be something warm that I'm drinking, whether it's like an elixir or a tea or whatever it may be. And then, the house is up. And so it's, mom, family, that. My schedule, I shift in accordance to where things are at in my life and my cycle. And just, because I've been tracking for 20 some odd years now, I can look ahead, even as my cycle starts to change a little bit in perimenopause, and just kind of know generally, this is a good time to plug this in versus not. I stabilize my blood sugar like a queen, because if that is out of balance, I'm unhinged. I can't focus. I can't be as present as I need to be. So blood sugar stability is huge. And eating food that really feels good to me, not food that is, I'm told is healthy for me or is unhealthy for me, but really truly connecting to the food that I know vibrationally when I put in my body, it is a heck yes. And I think that's where we can struggle a lot as women too, is that we've classified food as healthy, unhealthy, clean or dirty. And it gets confusing. And so for me,
they're reclassified. They're reclassified over time too, right?
Right. All the time. The time. So that is really big. And, for me, I go back and forth. The podcast has been really cathartic for me. I do solo bites on Thursdays now. I often record them when I'm walking, and it's really cathartic for me. I write a lot. I get to bed early. Ladies, if there is only one thing you could choose to do for yourself that is going to have probably the biggest bang for buck on everything, from your mitochondrial health at its deepest layer to everything that you hope for, it is go to bed. Go to bed. Even if you're not sleeping right away, just lie yourself down. Because that is we literally can't put that in a bottle for you. Yeah. It is something you have to really work towards.
Totally. And I think, we resist it too, right? We're like, oh, I'll just watch one more show. Oh, I'll just one more email, one more thing. And I completely agree with you. You are going to have all the things that you're trying to avoid, this inferior fuel partitioning, your motivation to get things done, your likelihood of movement of any kind is going to be kiboshed by, you trying to get the energy that you should have had. You're going to have processed sugars and food, simple energy, and you're probably not going to move the way that you should when you are sleep deprived. And I think we've all been sleep deprived. If you're a mother, you know what that means. You have you are the president of the sleep deprived, company. And I think, I remember writing boards. It was like 3 days of board exams. And in between I was studying for 8 hours. So I would, write the board exams for 8 hours. I'd go and I'd study for the next day, another 8 hours, probably all night, sit down and write another 8. And then I did that. I mean, I was so sick after getting my license. It was, so we push ourselves beyond the physical limits of our matter, thinking that, oh, it's just this one thing. It's just this one thing. But these are the accumulation of these insults really do add up, so that, I find a lot of women in perimenopause are like, all of a sudden I can't sleep. Yeah. I just, one night, 1 week, just lost it. No ability to sleep. So,
But this is what you just described, Steph. It's like, it's unbelievable that we have the ability as women where you could literally do what you did for those 72 hours while having little ones, and get done what you needed to get done, because we can do that. But there is a cost for how often we tap into that power that we have to do that. And if that's how we're running our life day to day, that is where the burnout happens. That is where the women say, like, I was fine and then I wasn't. That doesn't actually happen, right? It's a slow build. But because we are hardwired with this just, incredible resiliency, we can also ignore, dismiss, suppress until the body is just like, all right, enough's friggin' enough. Like, I've been giving you signs and symptoms left, right, and center. You're not listening. Now I'm going to, slam you into the wall or force you to lay on the ground. And that's why we do what we do, because we don't want women to get to the point, because you and I both have actually been at that point. And it is not fun.
It's not fun. And I would say that it borders on abuse. You are abusing you're abusing your physiology and you're not honoring it, which I think is kind of brings me to the next piece of this, which is I've heard you talk, and just knowing you for years, I've heard you talk about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And these are energies. We're not talking about gender. We're not talking about chromosomal sex. We're talking about energies, where I think that there's been almost like a poo-pooing on masculine energy. It's like there's this toxic masculine energy. We have to eliminate it. And I would like to hear your thoughts on this, but I am of the opinion that there are many women like myself for many years who were divorced from her feminine, didn't honor the surrender, the slowing down, the nurture side of things. I was just putting my head down and punching stuff out, achieve at the cost of my health. But I also think that there's value in masculine energy, but it's the balance, if you will. I can't think of a better word than balance, but it's the balance between the two. It's tapping in, it's going all in masculine, and then saying, okay, on the other side of that, I'm going to oscillate all the way to the other end of the spectrum. And I'm going to slow down for 72 hours of the board exam. We're going to take 2 to 3 weeks off to recover from that. Speak to me a little bit about what the divine feminine or what feminine energy means to you, and how we can, bring that into balance into a society that really does only seem to honor the masculine, and what the masculine energy means to you as well.
Well, I think, starting with the masculine is that, to me, it is an energy of survival. And I think that for us as women, when we are in these situations or phases of life where it feels like we just have to survive and get through it, that's where we really tap into the masculine energy. It's much more androgynous. It's much more take control. The positive of that is you can absolutely get things done. And, I, much like you, in terms of I'm, very success and career oriented, and I have my passion projects and I love doing it to a fault. sometimes previously, and now I catch it. And so I think it's that you do need to have the masculine because that, and I also believe you need to have some ego. That's what creates drive. That is what gives us that level of hunger for what it is that we want to go after. And it's what also allows us to create completion. But the feminine is where grace and compassion live. And that's where the ebb and the flow is. That to me is like, simplicity is a mantra of my life. And when I'm living in my own feminine energy, that is where simplicity finds me. And that feminine energy it's softer, it's less struggle, it's more the parasympathetic. It is a calmer sense all throughout your body. There's no rushing. Things just unfold and happen as they will. And I can use those now as two ends of the same, cord to understand, am I under maximum tension? If I'm starting to feel everything tighten up again and my overall tone in my whole body is, getting rigid, that's too much masculine that's come in. I need to peel back. I need to soften. I need to really look at what am I doing? And am I doing things that feel feminine to me, right? So like, for me, it's things of how I nurture my body is very feminine. Being in nature for me feels very feminine. In my nighttime routine of using oils on my skin and using a gua sha and taking the time to do that and not rushing, that feels very feminine for me. The colors I choose to wear, putting earrings on, even if I'm going to go work out, that feels feminine to me. There's no rule of feminine versus masculine. You have to define it for yourself. Being the first one to like reach out to hold my husband's hand or go in for a hug, that feels feminine to me. Allowing it to last longer. Like there's all these different things. So I think for us as women, you have to allow yourself to, and it was very hard for me in the beginning with the feminine energy, because I've always been the one who on the outside was like, well, she's got her shit together. And I've always been, she's the leader, she's the doer, she doesn't need help, she's got it on her own. And if you start to be cast as that, you start to take it on and believe it. And then it gets very hard to ask for help or to soften those parts of you that really just need to be held or supported or cared for. So I did a lot of energy work. I did a lot of healing around that as well too. I don't know if that answers that in the way that you were looking for, but that's what I got.
No, I love it. It's great because I do think that the definition does vary from person to person. This is something that I am intensely curious about around what does it mean to be feminine? And I think that it's important, particularly in the last 18 to 19 months. I know that I have been seeing women who have been in this pandemic where there's been so much uncertainty, so much change, like rapid change. We are seeing people stuck in their sympathetics. We are seeing people stuck in this fight or flight response and not being able to disengage to do some of the things that you just mentioned, to go for a walk, to find joy, like to be someone who allows joy in, where we are constantly just sort of holding on in this sort of frenetic energy where we're just like, okay, what's going to happen next? And now what's going to happen next? And now what's going to happen to my kids? And what's going to happen to me? And what's going to happen to my job? And what's, and we're sort of seeing some of the fallout of that politically and economically, across the world, really. And it's interesting because what I'm finding people are most holding on to right now, at least this is my observation, is tell me the supplement, tell me the workout I need to do, tell me the nutrition. And it's like, we need to talk about you feeling pleasure. What does it mean for you to feel pleasure? And that could be sexual pleasure. That could be, you just, had some really like going in for a hug or putting on some earrings or choosing a color to wear or, putting on makeup or whatever. We're forgetting about some of these things that make us feel good. It could be just wearing lingerie that no one's going to see, including your partner. It's just, that you got the sexy knickers on. No one else needs to know about it. But, for how that makes you feel, I think is important. And that's what I see that being eroded somewhat. And so I'm interested in bringing that conversation back front and center because, you are a mother, you're an entrepreneur, you are a partner, you are, and we're forgetting what it means to to put boundaries up and say, I'm actually not going to scroll on Instagram and look at all and this is something I would, in the era of like transparency and honesty, I have had to put these own rules on myself because I can go down rabbit holes and I'll be like, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. And, so I think that it's really important that we talk about what does it mean for things to look, what if things were easy, and this is Giovanni, my partner, who I know, but for my Betties who've never met him, he sometimes will say to me, imagine it all works out exactly the way that you want. What would you be doing right now? And I'm like, oh yeah, I wouldn't be on Instagram freaking out and going down the PubMed rabbit hole and looking at how science has been abandoned and all these different things. I'm like, I would be focusing on, self-betterment. I'd be focusing on self-care. I'd be focusing on being in nature and smelling the trees and planting my little plants and, all the things that I like to do.
Well, and you know what, with that as well, it's like, I have really in this last year and a half, and I was good at boundaries before this year and a half, but I'm like
wizard level
amazing now. Like call me a witch for that. Cause that I'm like, I have gotten so darn good at disappointing people and being completely okay with it. I cannot be responsible for other people's expectation of me, getting back to the message, being this, being that, like whatever the heck it is. And here's the thing, ladies, we teach people how to treat us. We also teach them what to expect from us. So if one of the things you're constantly hearing yourself say is, I'm so tired, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so depleted. All right, well, where's the leak? Where is it coming from? And then how are you participating in that? My email signature used to say it's going to take me 48 to 72 hours. And now it's like, I'll get back to you maybe 7 to 10 days. And I don't feel guilt around it anymore. I can't, because there's the obvious things that we know are impacting our stress and our hormone levels and our cortisol and our insulin and our body's ability to recover and to heal. And then there are the ones that are so tiny and we think are so minuscule that we don't realize are creating chronic low-grade inflammation. And that feeling of not letting people down is chronic low-grade inflammation. And that could be the thing that for some of those women that are like, just one day, I just started not feeling good. It's like, but that, unless you were literally hit by a bus, like literally it hit you, that does not happen. And so I think we need to be more aware and more cognizant of that. And I get it right now because I work with a lot of entrepreneurs too, who are feeling this crunch of uncertainty in the world. And, if they don't work, the money doesn't come in, and all these and people who are at the, risk of losing their jobs, or maybe it's their partner. And it's bringing this whole, we talked about this like survival energy, this post-traumatic stress, all of these different things to the surface. And none of us were prepared. We weren't given a warning in 2019. Hey, you need to do this work to set your body up because next year is going to be a humdinger. And the year after that ain't going to get much better. We didn't know. So I think a lot of people were already at their maximum tension.
Yeah.
And then this happened and now here we are.
I love the term maximum tension. One of my mentors, Patrick Gentempo, who I know that you know, uses this term a lot. And he talks about not being able to get anything done because literally you're being pulled to the left and pulled to the right and pulled up and pulled down to the point where you're going to snap. You can't move. So he talks about how important it is to get things in alignment so that you can redirect the left and the right energy so that it's all, maybe forward momentum so that you can begin to make progress in it. So just loved what you said about that. And that kind of brings me to this program that you have started for women. It's called The Audacious Woman. And I would love for you to explain, first of all, what does it mean to be an audacious woman? And then talk a little bit about how you are serving women to up level in what appears to be every facet of their life, including, their health and their hormones and finances and all the different things. So talk to me about what it means to you to be an audacious woman.
Well, to me, to be an audacious woman is to stand firmly and clearly in the you that you are in all areas of your life, and to do it unapologetically and from this place of serene beauty and certainty. And I think that for a lot of us as women, we're so out of touch. And the women that I've had the honor of working with over all these decades, it's always come to them feeling like they need to work on their body. And in some cases, yes, but that's the thing we always attach ourselves to. So if I start a new program and I start a new plan that's focused on my body and I look a different way or I function a different way, then that's what's going to, help me in all the other areas of my life. And there can be something said to that, but the women I work with, there's deeper things going on. And so the Audacious Woman came from, I was doing a lot of morning pages and journaling for a long time and asking myself, like, where were the women? I didn't have the female mentors in my late teens, early 20s, my early 30s in my career. It was all men that I had around me in business that were, offering me support, mentorship, suggestions. And I didn't see any other women and moms who were doing what I knew was in me or what I wanted to do. I just didn't see it. And so I learned a lot on my own. I gathered what I could from the men. And then this group of women started to emerge. And I didn't sit back and wonder how they were doing it. I went right to them and was like, show me, teach me. I am here. I am a sponge ready to soak it all up. And it was so helpful to me. And I always think of the women that they don't have access to this or they don't have the mentors in their lives. And so I started to write out, if I created a mentorship, not a mastermind, but a mentorship, where I created this faculty, where I brought in speakers, where we really focused on, yes, our health, but deeper than that. I want to help women with their finances. I want to have women boldly step into understanding their numbers and have financial wealth and health, their mindset around everything, health, money, relationships, bring in people who specialize in relationships, our energy around pleasure and around sex, our energy around our spiritual side of us, the soulful side of us, the parts of us that we've yet to ever even tap into, because we've been afraid or we've had the shame around it. And so I ran a beta group last year with 12 women, and we started last January. It has been the most it's been metamorphic. I don't even know any other way to describe what has evolved for these women in the program, but also being a facilitator. And I didn't know if I would offer it again. I was like, I feel like I have this thing in me brewing. I'm going to put it out there in the world. It literally sold out over a weekend. I didn't do a funnel. I didn't even have a sales page for it. I didn't do anything. I just said, here's the thing. I'm going to do it. And it's been this beautiful undoing, unlearning, and becoming for all of the women involved. And so now this year, I'm like, I am here for it and I am all in. I took 12 women last year. I'm only taking 10 this year. I want to have this really intimate container. And I've just been building this faculty of other incredible women that I want more women to have in their community. I want to build these circles for women. And then the women who are in the Audacious Woman, they become ambassadors of the program. So all the women that have worked with me in the last year, they are coming into this sisterhood of helping the women that are in this round. And it's just going to continue to bloom and to grow. And it's really coming from a place for me. This isn't something where I'm like, I'm going to bring 100 people in. I'm running it. I'm going to keep it small, but very specific. And yeah, so it's, I have the Simplicity Project and Synced and the Hormone Project. And I'm so intimately connected to all of these programs, but the Audacious Woman, it's different. It's also for the entrepreneur who's just frigging stuck. And they've done all the formulas. They have the funnels. They've put everything in. They've done the semantics, right? They've done all the stuff, but they've not yet tapped into the woman that they are. That's what this is.
That sounds amazing. And I think that there's a lot of women who are listening that would be very interested in learning more about that. So you talk about health, you talk about hormones, you mentioned finances. What are some of the other verticals that you got in there?
Spirituality, mindset, also pleasure, sex, so much. But I have an energy healer who comes in and works with us every single month as well too. And we do virtual retreats. They also get oodles of gifts. Giving gifts is one of my love languages. Acts of service is also one of them. But all the gifts that I provide are from grassroots companies that are also female run businesses. So there is, it's much like, I know you're the same way, Steph. There's so many touch points I want to have of creating impact. And I'm really here for the help of women, not just the business of it. I'm all in.
It's interesting because you and I are similar in that I think that for a woman to really get this, and I had this conversation with Molly Galbraith with her book where she talks about healing yourself first, like getting good with your own body. And then once you've achieved that, then it's time to pay it forward. It's time to help other women. And I hear this in you where you said this a couple of times in our conversation where you're like, yes, nutrition's important. Yes, movement's important. Nobody's throwing shade at that. Those are foundational basics. But if you also don't sink a layer deeper, if you don't actually look at maybe some of your past traumas, maybe some of the stories that you tell yourself, maybe your unwillingness to whatever blockage that you might have, unwilling to look at it or work on it or sit with it, the physical manifestations will persist. Yeah. And we often, and I've heard this from people I've had on the pod talking about psychedelics and talking about indigenous cultures and how they view illness. And it's often the person is spiritually sick first. They are emotionally and spiritually sick first. And then it descends into the physical realm. And you'll see the physical manifestation of that sickness as blood glucose dysregulation, as hormonal mayhem, whatever it may be. And it is only when you get to that sort of fifth dimension, if you will, of looking at your soul, looking at your spiritual health, where you truly step into the person, the woman that you already are. You already are this audacious woman. She just has a bunch of cloaks on her. She's got it's like the onions, right? It's like the layers. You just got to shed them and cry as you and cry as you peel the onion. It's about shedding. It's addition through subtraction.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, you said a couple things in there. I had a consult with one of the women that I'm working with this morning, and one of her biggest frustrations is that she always gets told that she's fine. And so she worked with her doctor for a while, she worked with an ND for a while, and everything, was fine. And so we've been working together and we've run, some different testing, and she just had a lot of gut stuff that was coming up. And I said, you know what, let's just run a GI map. I'd really just like to rule some things out. And so I took her through her results this morning. And she said, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, just rate this, tell me kind of where I'm at. And I've been working with her for a year and a half now. And I said, it's like a 5 out of 10. There's some things that are a little bit hairier that we need to work on, but overall. And she was like, I'm so tired of being a 5 out of 10. I just want something really bad to show up. And I said, okay, well, your anti-gliadin level and your secretory IgA level, this is really bad. This is not good. We just went through that. But overall, you have a lot of other things that are going well. So the balance of that makes it a 5 out of 10. And I said, but here's the thing. I've been working with you for how long now? And you keep doing this. You keep paying for more tests and you keep going around the thing. And every time I bring up with you, you're holding on to a lot of emotion and a lot of stuff. And every time you start to feel it, you turn your camera off on our call. You have to make a conscious choice of whether or not you are going to do that work. And she didn't turn the camera. She gave me the middle finger. She didn't turn the camera off today. She gave me the middle finger.
She gave me the middle finger. That's progress. That's progress.
She laughed and then she started to cry because there is a lot that's going, and it's, I'm not trying to bring that forward to them, but that is the thing is we are made up of so much. It is not just at the end of our fork or the supplements we're taking or the workout we're doing or not doing. You think of, even if you're my whole life has been amazing, have the last 19 months, because that can be enough. It doesn't have to be trauma the way we think about trauma.
Right.
It could be something that you have plugged away that you didn't think was a thing that is that chronic low grade.
Well, Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this. It's your interpretation of the event that matters. It's not 100%. The event itself. It's how you internalized it. And, I feel for that woman, but also really feel grateful that she has you as a coach, because sometimes you need a coach who's just going to push you a little bit to say, here's the mirror. Do you want to look in the mirror? You don't have to. but it's here if you want to keep your camera on, I'm holding up a mirror for you. And this is the path forward. And you can, it's like red pill, blue pill. Like you can choose which one you want, and either is fine, still going to love you no matter what. But the path that you need to take, in some cases, I can speak to myself, my own journey. It gets worse before it gets better. Right? It gets worse. It gets darker and it gets worse. But then on the other side is bliss. On the other side is freedom. And you reconstruct, your role, whether it's your interpretation of events or your role in your life, which you're never going to be taught in school. No nutrition course is ever going to give that to you. That needs to be something that you either work with a facilitator or in a circle, as you're talking about with this group. And it needs to be women who are not, kind of to what we were talking about before, the same caliber of woman, right? When you have sort of women who are on the same journey together, where, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? Yes. You're all for, it's all for one for all type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So where can people find out more about you? I know you have a podcast, like plug all the places that people can find you, your podcast, your programs, Audacious Woman. Tell me all the places.
So podcast is the Simplicity Sessions. So you can find that Apple, like iTunes, Spotify, all the places. The website is www.jenpike.com. And that's where you can see all the info about the various programs. And then Instagram is where I spend most of my time. And that is Jen with 2 N's, Pike, Pike. And for the Audacious Woman, if they're interested. So that's not something that I put out there a lot because I offer it once a year. They can actually just email us directly at info@jenpike.com, and then we can send them the information and an application.
And when does the next cohort start?
So we were going to start at the end of November, but I actually think I'm going to be pushing it into December. I try to line everything up with the moon. All of our seasonal all of our retreats that happen virtually are also based in the seasons and in the moon cycle. And I'm just very attuned to the energy right now. And I feel like we may need December to be the start, not November.
The winter solstice around there. Wonderful. Yeah. Well, I will have all of that information in the show notes. And so people that can check you out online, Instagram, and check out the Audacious Woman program.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great chatting with you today, Steph.
It's been just a blessing every time I get to spend time with you. It's always wonderful. It's always wonderful to have other women in my own circle who I can speak freely with. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.